Well, hello again, church. I am honored to be able to preach this morning, and I just want to say I genuinely love worshiping here with our church. Been in church all my life, and I love worshiping here. I think we have some genuine people. I love our worship team worships genuinely, right? And that's part of our values, being wholehearted, right? Being real and showing up with all of ourselves, the good and the bad, and just genuinely worshiping. And so I just thank you for being a church that we can worship together with. I genuinely love doing that. All right, we're continuing our series, The Story Isn't Over. The story isn't over. And yeah, I think we need to be reminded of that, right? The story is not over. And the problem we kind of want to address with the whole series is that when our circumstances do not match our God given promises and dreams, when life doesn't fully seem to line up with what we think God has given us, promised us, what do we do with that? And it's a reminder that the story isn't over. The story isn't over. Yes, sometimes we get life wrong. We can get God's voice wrong. Um, you say, "Oh, well, I love God. God should give me everything I desire and dream of." No, that's not. I think that's a mistake on that one. But when we genuinely think we're getting it right, but it still doesn't seem to match up. What do we do with that? The story is not over. And so our theme verse, our verse that kind of encapsulates the whole series is Genesis 50:20. I know we were just standing, but if you can, I ask you to stand in honor of God's word as we will read this together. Genesis 50:20. And this is Joseph speaking to his family. This is kind of the end of the story. Let's read it. Here's what it says. You intended to harm me, but God intended it all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save the lives of many people. Jesus, let your word become alive to us. You speak what I can't. You open ears in ways that I can't. Help us trust you, hold on to you, knowing the story is not over. Amen. You may be seated, church. Again, that's a little spoiler. The end of the story is Joseph ended up in a pretty good position that not only helped himself, but saved the lives of many people. So yes, he went through a lot of hardships, a lot of ups and downs, but it ended up God used it to save the lives of many people. Joseph's story, at every stop, it was not over. God kept using it. And two things we want you to take away. Kind of, if you take away two big things from this series, is one is we often operate in kind of days and weeks and months, and God operates in years and generations. Now, we also believe he is the God of the miraculous instant. It doesn't mean, he can't come down and change something instantaneously. He does that. We have stories here of people who have had instantaneous miracles. God does something quickly. But at the same time, his vision, his plan is usually a lot bigger than ours. And we see the world through our own eyes, and we think, weeks and months, that's a long time. God can work in years and generations. So trust that he has a bigger picture. And then two, God can take any and every part of our life and turn it into something good. Any and every part. Your deepest suffering or your deepest just boring nothingness. He can take what it seems like boring nothingness. He can take that, what seems little, what seems obscure, what seems unimportant to us. He can take it and turn it into something good, which means he's never done. No matter what age, no matter what circumstance, he's not done, and neither are you. He's not done, and neither are you. He can take those things. That's what redemption is, taking something worthless or something not so good, turning it into something good. We want you to walk away with those things that for this whole series. All right, so kind of recap where the series has been so far. We're reminded that God made a promise to Abraham in Genesis 17. He said, Abraham, I'm going to choose your family, and your family is going to grow and become awesome, and you're going to bless the whole earth. All the earth is going to be blessed through your family. And then the rest of the Old Testament basically is like, really? This family, this messed up family, this is the family God chose? They were not special. They were not any better than anyone else. And if you read the stories, you're reminded of that. But God chose them, and you read the stories, and it's like, how is God? Are they ever going to get it right? Are they ever going to be the blessing to the earth they were supposed to be? And Joseph is Abraham's great-grandson. So Joseph is Abraham's great-grandson. We're continuing this family. I shared a couple weeks ago, this is a messed up family. There are 2 wives and 2 servants who are also mothers of children. And so there's a lot of drama in the family. A lot of brothers and sisters, a lot of drama going on. Messed up family. Joseph gets betrayed by his brothers. They're jealous of him. They sell him into slavery. And that first week, I shared from the brothers' perspective. The brothers who committed betrayal, their own act of betrayal, God used it to save them. That's the kind of gracious God we serve. Even when we, our own evil, our own betrayal, our own shortcomings, God can use, not just in spite of those things, but through those things. And he did that with Jesus on the cross. He didn't just save us in spite of the cross, but through the cross. You'll hear that phrase a lot, not in spite of, but through. And then last week we were gone. We had a guest, Ethan, come and shared of Joseph in Genesis 39 serving in Potiphar's house, and how he had a temptation to sleep with Potiphar's wife. He refuses, and he gets thrown in prison. And yes, Pastor Ethan shared at the most basic level, we want to resist temptation. We don't want it to take any hold. We want it to even in our minds. And Jesus says that, right? Even in your heart, there can be sin. So it's not like, Jesus, you can have everything except for my mind. No, he wants everything. And we believe that. We believe that there's a resistance to temptation and sin at the most basic level. So when the time comes, right, we can resist that. So that is true. And we're called to holiness in every single area. Every single moment, every single area, God calls us to holiness, and his grace helps us do that. And so that is true. And at the same time, there's this interesting dynamic where we believe that, yes, God calls us to holiness at even the molecular level, if you will. But at the same time, we wrestle and figure out that even having a thought or feeling a feeling, that in itself doesn't mean that's sin, because feelings, the best way I've heard it is feelings are like waves in the ocean, right? You can't really fight them. You know, when I was a kid, I loved going and trying to punch a wave. It felt pretty cool, but did I stop the wave? No. Rolled right on through. Feelings are like waves. You can't control which ones come, but you can control which ones you hop on and ride. Right? And so you may not be able to control what thought comes into your mind, what feeling comes into your body, right? Being tempted itself is not a sin. Jesus was tempted and yet had no sin. So having that desire, that feeling is not a sin, but it's choosing when we hold on to it and we nurture it and we ride that thought and we let it control us and we let it define our lives. That's when we've given control to something else. And so there is a wrestling, there is a figuring out, there is a balance of, yes, we want to resist, we want to have victory in every area of our lives, and yet know that we're not perfect and we may be broken, and just because a feeling comes, it doesn't mean it itself is sin. And I use a thought, here's a cool stat. My school, Valley Forge, a little small Christian school, you know what? We've never lost to Ohio State in football. Do you know that? We've never lost to Ohio State. Now, you may say, well, it's because you don't have a football team and you've never played Ohio State. Well, but I would say, doesn't matter. We've never lost, right? Right? But it's not really that impressive that we've never lost to Ohio State, right? Because we never actually engaged. And I would say in the same way, if you never have even a desire for something, there's not a lot of victory in that. Right? If I said, church, I've been living in victory over ayahuasca, the Peruvian hallucinogenic drug, for the last year, it's not that impressive because I only ever even heard of it a few months ago, right? It's not like I've never like had to fight that temptation, right? The victory and the glory comes when we are hit by our desires, right? I think C.S. Lewis says you don't know the strength of your desires until you actually resist them. And so just never having any temptation or desires, I think God is more glorified when we actually are hit with it and we have to choose and say, God, okay, I can't never feel this again, but I can choose to let the feeling come and surrender it to God, right? Feelings are like waves. So I think we want to have both of those, that yes, God calls us to holiness in every level, but yet we can't control every feeling and thought. It's going to come. We have physical bodies, we have emotions. Those things are held together in wholeness and intention, right? And so, yeah, we just, perfection and never ever feeling anything, I don't think is realistic, but letting God have control of every area of our life and moving towards wholeness and moving towards victory, because there is victory. He's a God of power. He's a powerful name, right? Even in addiction, right? There can be power through it, and even though it's a difficult struggle, he can have victory in it. And it's not just about, well, I'm never going to feel that again. Who's ever said I'm never going to do that again? And who's filled at that? My hands up there, right? So it's both of those things. Yes, honoring God in every single area, even in our thoughts, but knowing, the temptation of feelings will come, and we still let Him have control instead of those things. That was last week, and today, now we're in Genesis 40. So Joseph gets sold into slavery. He serves in Potiphar's house, who's the captain of the guard. He serves well, and he gets tempted. Now he gets thrown in prison for something he didn't do. Think about how many twists and turns Joseph has gone through. He's the favorite son, yay, but his brothers hate him. And he gets sent on a special mission by his father, yay, but his brothers betray him. But he becomes in charge of Potiphar's whole household, yay, but it means the wife tricks him and lies about him and gets thrown into prison. Bummer. But now he's in charge. If you finish chapter 39, he gets put in charge of the whole prison. Pretty cool. And it's like there's so many just twists and turns, ups and downs, and it's a reminder the story isn't over. Just because something good happens doesn't mean life is just, I want to say honeycombs and cupcakes. I've never heard that phrase. I don't know why I want to say that, but doesn't mean that. And just because something bad happens doesn't mean life is just over. Yeah, I don't know why I had that phrase, Ginger. That's a good face for why I thought that. Right, but the story isn't over. Even in the ups, even in the downs, God is working all through behind the scenes. So here's where we're going to go today with the message. We're going to walk through Genesis 40, all right, kind of go beat by beat through the story. I hope you have scripture with you, either physical or on your phone. Just because having the whole chapter up is a lot, but we'll have the beats and go through the story. And then let's see, how can we see Jesus through this text? And this has been a really fascinating text for me recently. I've shared part of this sermon at our community service at the auditorium a few weeks ago, of seeing Jesus here in this text in prison with Joseph, or at least pointing to Jesus. Jesus isn't in the story, but it points to him. And then finally, what can we learn from Joseph? So we go through the text, we see how it points to Jesus, and we see how we can find ourselves in the story as well. All right, let's get back into Joseph's crazy story. All right, so the Genesis 40 opens. Joseph's in prison, and it says the warden of the prison had trusted Joseph, basically with kind of, I guess I'm not 100% sure how those ancient Egyptian prisons worked, but it seemed like it was a prison for political prisoners, and Joseph was in charge of administration or taking care of the prisoners. So he was a prisoner himself, but he also got put in charge. I guess he just had a good attitude and good character. And it says Pharaoh's cupbearer and baker were thrown in prison. It says they offended Pharaoh. Cupbearer, which I guess in today's world, maybe that'd be like personal chef. He would bring the wine and personally serve it to Pharaoh. And then I guess the baker also would be kind of his personal, feeding the bread and stuff like that. It says they offended Pharaoh. Now, do we know what they did? No. Do we know if it was right for them to be put in prison? We don't know. Just says they made Pharaoh mad. And we hear stories of people getting crazy power. They can get upset over the craziest things. Like, my Skittles were the wrong color. You go to jail. Like, who knows? That we don't know if they did something actually wrong or just made the king mad for no real reason. We don't know that. But they're in prison. They're in prison. Then it says they have dreams. The cupbearer and the baker have dreams. And it just says they're walking around prison and they're feeling stressed and anxious about their dreams. And remember this, we're going to come back to this. Joseph just noticed they looked a little off, and he asked, "Hey, what's going on? What's going on?" And they share the dreams, and Joseph says, "Well, God can interpret dreams." And I think this is pretty cool from Joseph. Because remember, dreams were his thing, right? As a kid, he was given dreams of being powerful, of being elevated. And now he's literally in prison in a foreign country. He could not be further away from those dreams. And he could have become bitter and said, "Oh, you have dreams. Well, good luck with those. They're going to get you sold, to another country, and you're going to end up in," right? He could have become bitter and said, dreams. Yeah, God likes to fool around and give you dreams and just tease you. But he doesn't. He doesn't. He just says, well, God can interpret dreams. Tell me your dreams. Tell me your dreams. So the cupbearer goes first. Cupbearer says, I had a dream, and I reached out and I squeezed the grapes into a cup, 3 grapes, 3 vines of grapes, into a cup, and I took that cup back to Pharaoh. Joseph says, here's what the dream means. In 3 days, Pharaoh's going to lift up your head and restore you to position. Now, lift up your head, that basically meant you're going to be elevated out of here. You're going to get out of prison and go back to your position, right? When we're sad and we're bummed out, how do we walk around like this? But when we're happy and we're good, we lift up our head, right? It's that imagery of your head will be lifted up. Elsewhere in 2 Kings, it talks about how another prisoner was freed. It says they were lifted up. Their head was lifted up out of prison. So that's kind of an idiom in Hebrew that means you'll be set free. Right? You're downtrodden, you're trapped, you'll be set free, you'll be good to go. Your head will be lifted up, right? That's what Joseph says to the cupbearer. Your head will be lifted up. And he says, cupbearer, please tell Pharaoh about me. Joseph is confident in his innocence. He said, I got sold into slavery unfairly. I got put in prison unfairly. He says, cupbearer, please remember me. Please remember me. I also, just real side note, I wonder how Joseph felt thinking, wow, God gave me dreams in another lifetime ago, and I'm still waiting. This guy gets his dreams fulfilled in 3 days. How easily could he have turned jealous? And how easily do we become jealous when we see other people living in God's promises and we feel like we're still waiting around for them? They got healed. They got blessed. They got a baby. Their kids are... We easily can fall into that. Let's keep trusting God's faithfulness. All right, so cupbearer, your head's going to be lifted up. You're going to be good. Please tell Pharaoh about me. Appeal to the highest court. Then the baker says, oh, that guy's going to get freed. Well, Joseph, tell me my dream. Here's what happens. The baker says, I have 3 baskets of bread on my head, and then the birds come and eat the bread. Joseph, what does that mean? What does that mean? And Joseph says, well, baker, guess what? Pharaoh's going to lift up your head off of your body. Wah, wah, wah. I think it's interesting how either Joseph said it this way or the writer phrased it this way, but this is kind of a mean way to say it. Like, hey, your head's going to be lifted up. You're going to be, you're going to be out of here, and your head's going to be lifted up off your body. Like, why would you say it like that? That's a mean way to say it. It reminds me of, there's a show we used to watch. There's a doctor who was very literal, and he comes to the family. He says, hey, your son's going to be all right. And they go, oh, thank goodness, doctor. He goes, wow, you're pretty happy. His left hand is gone. He's going to be all right. Right? Like, why would you say it like that? Come on. Yeah, right? Like, why does Joseph say it like this? Your head's going to be lifted up off your body, and your body's going to be stuck on a wooden pole, and the birds are going to eat your flesh. Yikes. Yikes. Skewered, yeah. Skewered or whatever, or, I don't know, but yeah, affixed to a wooden pole somehow. Ugh, not so fun for the baker. The dreams ended up coming true. Again, we don't know if the cupbearer deserved to be set free. We don't know if the baker deserved to die. We don't know. It could have just been the whimsies of crazy person in power, right? We don't know. So it doesn't comment on the rightness or wrongness of, hey, don't be a baker or you're going to get your head chopped. That's not in the text. What the text is showing us is that God was able to correctly interpret the dreams through Joseph. And God gave those dreams as proof that he knew what was going on and that Joseph was able to use God's power to interpret those dreams. The dreams came true, but still, again, not for Joseph. I think it's interesting. Joseph saw these dreams come true in 3 days, and yet he was still waiting. And the chapter ends. The cupbearer gets out, and Joseph is thinking, finally, this cupbearer, he's going to be so happy and thankful that I gave him this prophecy. But it says the cupbearer forgets about Joseph. Joseph finally is like, I'm going to get out of here, this prison. But no, he has to wait some more. So dreams in prison. Dreams in prison. Joseph, the man of dreams, helps interpret dreams of two other guys. They get proven to become true, and Joseph just stays in prison. Man, that has to be tough. Okay, so that was Genesis 40. That was Genesis 40. So, number 2, can we see Jesus in this text? Can this text point us to Jesus in any way? And I think it can. I think it can. This is the portion I shared at the community service, and I think this is so cool. My favorite thing is finding Jesus, how the Old Testament points us to Jesus. And I think Jesus' life mirrors Joseph's life, and we'll talk about that in a couple weeks. But think about who was in prison with Joseph. It was the cupbearer. And what does a cupbearer work with? He works with the fruit of the vine, grapes. And the baker. And a baker works with what? Bread. The fruit of the vine and bread. What does Jesus call himself? He says, I am the true bread of life. And what happened to the true bread of life? His body was lifted up and attached to a wooden pole, just like the baker's was. To take the punishment that the baker received, Jesus took that. The punishment that humanity deserves, Jesus took that. He was the true bread of life. Where was he born? Bethlehem, the house of bread, another cool thing. Right? He was the son of the house of bread. He was the true baker who was attached to the wooden pole. He took the punishment of the baker. And he says it himself, the Son of Man, will be lifted up. Jesus himself uses that same imagery. I will be lifted up and attached to a wooden pole. Skewered, I guess, from the, not like skewered, but I guess the nails going in, right, in a different way. I'm not trying to joke about that. It's serious. It might not be fun, but true bread of life. He also calls himself, I am the true vine. I am the true vine. And just as the cupbearer was raised up to serve, it says, at the hand of the king. Think about how Romans describes Christ Jesus. Paul says, Jesus was raised to life, exalted at God's right hand. And catch the end of this verse. He is interceding for us. Jesus is interceding for us. What was the cupbearer supposed to do? Intercede for Joseph. Intercede for the prisoner stuck in prison at the hand of the king. Paul paints this picture of Jesus that is truly exactly like the cupbearer, raised up from the pit of death back to the right hand of the king and intercedes for us. Jesus is the true cupbearer who did what the cupbearer could not. Jesus did not forget us in prison, but intercedes to lift us out of prison. And so we have communion today, and I think communion reminds us, and this story, Genesis 40, reminds us of what Jesus went through. We take the bread as a reminder that his body was broken. He took the punishment that humanity deserved. We betrayed God. We deserve to be broken, but Jesus said, I'll become a human instead, and I'll take humanity's brokenness. Jesus took the punishment of the baker, who was lifted up on a pole. Yet Jesus also was lifted up, just like the cupbearer, the fruit of the vine, was lifted up in exaltation and lifted up in blessing. And he intercedes for us. He brings us up with him. All right, so not to oversimplify, but there's a negative element and a positive. He takes the brokenness of sin, but he also lifts up in spiritual blessing of the new covenant. Can we receive communion today? Can we take the bread to begin? Take the bread. Can we remember? Jesus is the true baker whose suffering of the punishment proves God's power and plan. Thank you, Jesus, that your body was broken. You were willing to suffer pain and harm to take the curse of sin upon your shoulders. Let's take the bread. Jesus, as the true cupbearer at the right hand of God, is lifted up, and he makes us co-heirs with him. He brings us up out of the pit into the fullness of God's grace and mercy and faithfulness. We take the cup to remember Jesus has done that for us. Thank you, church, for joining the Lord's table today. We remember what Jesus has done. First and most importantly, remember what Jesus has done. And now, being secure in that, we can turn to what do we do? How do we live in response to that? So part 3, what can we learn from Joseph? And what I will say is, hold on to this image, is play t-ball. Play t-ball. You guys know what t-ball is? Little kids playing? All right, hold on to that image. We're going to get to that in a second. What can we learn from Joseph? Is that he was simply faithful to what was in front of him. God gave him a dream. You're going to be in charge. You're going to be powerful. And then the knocks started coming. Betrayal, sold, servanthood, being lied to. But what did he do? He was betrayed. He was sold into slavery. And he served Potiphar well. He just served well, had high character, and he could be trusted. And then in the moment when temptation came, Potiphar's wife wanted to sleep with him. He just refused. In the moment, he just said, no, I'm not going to do that. He just did what was in front of him. Now he gets thrown in jail unfairly. So what does he do? He just, well, all right, I'll serve in jail, I guess. I'll be a person of high character, a trustworthy person in jail. He served the jail well. He just kept being faithful to what was in front of him. He didn't know this was leading to his dream. He didn't know that. He didn't know, well, if I just serve in prison for 1,000 days, I'm going to be at it. Like, he didn't know. He just decided to do whatever was in front of him. And I think this is so cool. How did the interpretation of the dreams happen? He just noticed they looked off, and he asked them how they were doing. Hey, guys, you look off today. What's going on? He simply noticed, and he asked those guys how they were doing. A simple thing like that, just asking someone how they were doing. He noticed they looked upset. Why do you look so worried today? He asked them. And then through that, the things were set in motion. Yes, then God gave a gift, right? God gave the gift of interpretation. And the cupbearer goes up, and we're going to see later on, Joseph will get out of prison after another twist and turn. But when the time is right, God gives a gift. All Joseph did was just do what was in front of him. And often, that's what God asks of us. That's what God asks of us often. And I remember, growing up, and I felt like, okay, top of the line Christian, you go to Iran or Africa, and you serve as a missionary. And I will be there. That is a huge sacrifice. I am grateful God has not called us to that yet or ever. But in my mind, it was like, that's the best Christian you can be. And if I'm not doing that, I'm being a lower rung Christian. And as I grow older, I've learned, no, God needs faithful Christians right where I'm at right now. He's going to call some people to Iran and some people to Burundi, and that'll take care of itself. But he also just needs people to be faithful reflections of Christ in Palmer, Ohio, where I lived, and then in Chihuahua, Mexico, where I lived, and then in Valley Forge, Pennsylvania, where I lived. He needs just faithful reflections of Christ where we are at. So that's why I call it playing T-ball. T-ball faithfulness. T-ball faithfulness. What happens in T-ball? Right, in baseball, the kid goes up when it's their turn. They got the bat. The ball's right there. Just swing at the ball right in front of you. That's all you got to do. And then run in the right direction, which kids aren't able to do that so well. But right, when it's your turn, just go up and swing at what's right in front of you. The coach has teed it up for you. Just swing at what's right there. It's not your job to go catch every ball. It's not your job to take every single at bat. When it's your turn, just go up and hit what's in front of you. Right, and that does not mean just sit back and do nothing. Right, God's called us to live lives of power and adventure, and right, we believe in spirit-sourced dreams. So it doesn't mean just I'm going to sit in my room until an angel shows up. No, get on the bus, join the team. Right, go to the game, be part of the team. And when it's your turn, step up there and knock what's in front of you. T-ball faithfulness. That's what Joseph did. Doesn't mean don't have dreams, but God can use the little things right in front of us to build those dreams, even in ways we don't see. I am sure Joseph did not think Potiphar's wife lying about him was what God was going to use to get him to save people. I don't think Joseph saw how that was going to connect. God can do it. Maybe you don't think showing up to your work and just, being friendly or just, having a conversation, asking, you don't think that's leading towards something big. Even something maybe you don't see, but God is using it. He can. T-ball faithfulness. What can be done right here, right now? What's in front of you? And that can look different for everybody. Again, the coach, raises and lowers the tee based on how big or short the player is. They use different bats. I mean, when I was 5-year-old, we had a kid in our team who looked like he just came off the farm. Like he looked like he was 11. Some 5-year-olds are bigger than others. Doesn't mean you all have to hit it the same way or use the same bat. The coach adjusts. The coach knows what you need. The coach knows where you're at. But what's in front of you? T-ball faithfulness. And not just after or in spite of our difficulties, right? But through them. Maybe even in the lowest. Maybe all the coach is asking you just get a little bunt and just fast walk your heart out to first base. Maybe that's all you can do right now because it's all you got, but maybe that's all the coach is asking. Faithfulness through our wounds, our difficulties, might be the seed for that lifting up, just like Joseph. Not, well, okay, God, I'm going to serve you as soon as I get out of prison. I'll be a full go. No, through prison, through slavery, through being sold, through injuries, through depression. Again, I'm not minimizing the difficulties, but just doing the little things through it, God can take that. And we saw that with Jesus. Philippians, Paul talks about Jesus. Through his death on the cross, God elevated him so every knee would bow before him. Through that. Not after, not in spite of, through it. T-ball faithfulness, just swing at what's in front of you. Dream our dreams. Let's be filled with passion and power. That looks like just doing what's in front of us day after day. All right, so what? So what? Well, individually, right, this could be like Joseph, seeing someone at work and just asking how they're doing. And maybe God will give you a little gift right there. Maybe it's here. We want to start having a security team here so our kids can go to the restroom and so we can have a presence out there. And so maybe it's doing something a little bit like that. Maybe it's being a friendly face greeting. And you guys serve well. We have a church that serves. Right? But we have now 5 kids in the nursery. We need another couple of nursery people once a month. It could be that. Also, we have some things as a church we're doing. Listen, we think our God-given vision is we want to be a Delta, right? Delta Church, a healthy place that just makes the world around it a little better. We want to make our communities and our neighborhoods better, and we want to see marriages healed and addictions broken. We want this to be a place of refuge for people. We want that. We want the whole county to be effective. We want to eventually plant churches, in Centerburg and in Johnstown and all around. We want that. How does that start? Well, maybe right now it looks like moving a few fences and a few light posts for Sizzle and Sound this week. It's a little thing, but that's what's in front of us. Maybe it looks like showing up and praying for 30 minutes, a prayer that no one will hear except for God. But I think it looks like that. We want to be a place that makes our community better, and so here's what's in front of us. Like Pastor Ashley said, I asked, where's your biggest need? And they sent me to their sign-up sheet. Tickets the day of, pretty full. Handing out beer, no surprise, pretty full. But set up, tear down, trash, pretty empty. The tear down was on Sunday morning. I was like, we can't do that, but can we show up and can we set up some fences? I know when we ran events, having someone just say, hey, put us wherever you need us, that was like a breath of fresh air for someone just to say, put us wherever you need us. So that's what we're going to be as a church. I said, where do you need us the most? They said, set up or trash. I would have done trash, except it was only 2 people at a time. And I thought, we want to be a bigger group than just 2 people at a time, right? So you're welcome for not doing trash, church. But hey, can we show up and just set up some fences and just maybe only the organizer knows, and maybe they think, wow, Delta Church, They were pretty cool. They helped in the ways I needed. I don't know. I don't know what God can do with us moving a few fences and a few light posts next Friday. But that's what's in front of us. That's what the city said needs help. And so we're going to show up. We need at least 7 people. If you can do that, if you're able-bodied. Maybe next Sunday, just showing up, walking around the square. Maybe walking around the square. Maybe it's, I don't know exactly, but maybe it's just saying a few prayers. We're going to do that together. So I invite us, church, if you can, sign up for one of those things. I'll be there, right? So I'm not asking you to do something we're not doing, but just something, it's a little T-ball faithfulness. I want to look back in 10, 12 years and say, man, remember when, we had 8 people moving fences for Sizzle and Sound? Started off small, now, who knows what God can do with that? T-ball faithfulness. Let's be faithful to what's in front of us and see what God can do with it. The story, your story, our story isn't over. Every twist and turn, God can use every piece, good or bad, for something good, for other people around us and for his glory. So, that's the call today. Go play T-ball this week. Swing at whatever's in front of you. Maybe it's just asking someone how they're doing. Maybe it's visiting Dear Diane in her facility, right? Don't swing at a person, yes. Yes. Right, sometimes we want to do that. We want to turn around and punch the umpire. But that's the call, T-ball faithfulness. What's in front of you today? What's in front of you this week? Individually, as our church, we have some things in front of us. So that's our call, that's our setting, that's our dismissal today, church. I ask that you have a great and wonderful Sunday, wonderful week. And as you're heading out, Ashley and I are going to be up at front, just if you need prayer. If you want prayer for, seconds, for a few minutes, we invite you for prayer. But Isaac, if you can put some soft music on, and we're going to send you out, say, bless you, church. And if you need prayer, come see us up here. But let's play T-ball, just like Joseph, just like Jesus. Let's do it.